You mentioned I'm Lauryn Sargent. I'm a co-founder at Stories Inc. This is my co-founder, Scott Thompson, in the picture. And today, I'll be walking through 3 different case studies of clients we've had that we've created story-based content for recruitment marketing and employer branding purposes. I've really committed to this choose your own adventure theme. So that involves some audience participation. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but know that it's going to be hopefully highly interactive, and if for some reason it's not, I have a plan to show you content that's pretty interesting. So I'm going to start with a story. I know that recruiters are busy. I used to be one. I was one for 8 years. And one particular day, I had 3 final round interviews that had, like 6 interviews each, plus phone screens and everything that you do on top of your, a crazy day on top of your usual crazy days. And at the end of the day, I was just spent. I was emotionally, mentally ready to go home. Like, it had been a really hard day. So I took the metro home, and then my husband walked in the door and he said, "Oh, I'm so surprised to see you. Where's your car?" So I took the metro home forgetting I drove to work. So I know you're busy. I know what it's like. I remember. So my goal for this presentation is to make getting started in creating content based on employee stories easy for you. The good news is, as recruiters, you already know how to do this work. You already know how to talk to people about what's really important to them and get them to tell you what's important to them. You also already know what your candidates want to hear and what's special about your organization. So you have the skills to do this already, and hopefully I'll make it easier too with some tips that you can take home. Okay, so choose your own adventure. We're going to try it out. The first is that you pick the order. So we're going to talk about CVS, Dell, and Sodexo. Specifically CVS, we took a team approach to developing content. At Dell, we call it a deep dive approach, which means we developed content just for interns or just for veterans. And for Sodexo, we did a culture sweep. So that's interviewing people all over the company in all different positions to create a lot of content. And then the second part, that's going to last about half the presentation. The second part, you guys can tell me some of the recruitment challenges you're having, and I'll show you examples of content we've created that may have addressed that challenge. So some examples of recruitment issues you're facing might be, how do I talk about where I work when I can't talk about where I work? So that could be common for this room. You can't talk about all the cool projects that your company's doing because it's in a cleared environment. Or how about hiring manager interviews? How do we get our hiring managers to talk, and then what does that look like for candidates? So those are some ideas, but of course, I will be soliciting more from the audience. If during the presentation you think, oh, I wonder how I might develop content around this specific recruitment situation, happy to, if we have an example, share it on the fly. Oh, sorry guys, so you picked the order. Does anyone have, let's see a show of hands, who wants to see Sodexo first? Okay, who wants to see CVS first? Who wants to see Dell? Oh, it's like evenly split. Okay, so I'll just do what's easy for me then, since there wasn't overwhelming, and we'll start with Sodexo! Yay! So this is like the choose your own adventure that's like, great, you get a high five, great choice. This is the way the story's going. So for Sodexo, the reason that they came to us is that they needed content for their career site, which is a common need. They also have a blog, a careers blog that's very successful. It has, I think, 500 people reading the blog, so very successful jobs blog, employee blog. And, but most importantly, even though you think of Sodexo as having a ton, they're a large company, you may think they have a ton of resources, they needed the content to last for years. So that's why using a story approach in your content is really great, because it's all about what the organization did for that person. And if they leave, it's not them in your t-shirt saying, I'm never gonna leave, and they're gone like 2 months later, you have to take it down. So they needed content that's going to stay for a long time. So this is just a quick slide of the last interview that we conducted was in 2015, and they're still creating content for their career site and for their blog at least, using the stories that we collected in 2015. So I think a question, if you're thinking about doing this yourself in your organization, it's like, okay, so what do you expect of the people that will be the hiring managers and even yourself? What's the workload like? So I've broken this up into what Sodexo did for this project. So they conducted focus groups of their employees to find out how they were really delivering on their brand promise. So we say we're this, would employees say the same thing? They also did reputation surveys. They selected the storytellers, so they selected the people that we were going to interview. And then they gave us feedback when we're showing them different drafts of content. They also had a ton of ideas. So that's something really important when you think about developing content, making sure that the people you're developing it for have a say in what that looks like. So they wanted a checklist. Someone would tell a story, and then, hey, this ties to work-life balance, and there's a big check, work-life balance that kind of hits you in over the head, like this is what it's like to work here. Also, they wanted bloopers, and they wanted to inject some levity. So we had outtakes from the interview process that we included at the beginning. And they also were they really thought it was important to have 2-minute-long videos. So for them, content has to be great, but it has to be 2 minutes or less, and all of their videos are exactly 2 minutes. They also launched the polished content, and then we sent them all the transcripts with stories highlighted so they could create whatever content they wanted from employee stories. And that's really what's fueled their employee blog for the past 2 years. So this is what we did, and this slide's going to be the same for every client. This is what Stories Inc. does, and this is what you can do with your organization. So the people that are selected by the clients, we talk to them ahead of time just so that they're comfortable with us in the process. We don't overcoach because the idea is to get authentic, real stories. It's more like letting them know we're after your experience. Your experience is valuable. We actually come on site and we interview to get those stories. We transcribe from the entire interview day, and we look at all the different things that we're gathering. And then sometimes we pitch themes and content ideas. So it could be, hey, we know that we're developing a video series about your core values, but we got a lot of really great content around your tuition reimbursement program. So I think it's a good idea for us to develop some content around that, because that's what employees are getting really excited about, and that's what's affecting their lives. We also ask for Sodexo branding and style guides, to make sure that it's consistent with corporate branding. And then we present drafts until it's perfect. I think that's important too when you're doing this content in your organization, is to make sure that everyone's really excited about it.
Can I ask?
Oh, of course, please.
So how many people, what percentage of the population did you interview? And then what did you prep them with?
Great question.
And how did you pick them?
Yeah, so for Sodexo, oh, yeah?
Can you repeat it? 'Cause I'm not
Sure, of course. So the question was, how did Sodexo pick the people? And then is there a second part? And how many?
And then how did you prep them?
And how did we prep them?
Interview about?
Great. So for Sodexo specifically, we interviewed 45 people across 6 different sites. And the 6 different sites were to show the variety of their environments. So we went to a university, we went to a Fortune 100 company, and we also went to a hospital. So they have Sodexo employees in all of those environments. Per day, we can interview between 8 and 10 people. The way that Sodexo picked their people, so we worked with their brand team, which is a team of 3, and they looked at client satisfaction scores. So they picked the sites that had the highest client satisfaction scores. And then they asked the person responsible for the site to pick the people. So one thing that was really surprising about this project is actually how much the interview process doubles as a rewards and recognition if you choose to use it that way. So we flew out to Nebraska and interviewed 10 employees at a medical center in Nebraska. And they told the site leader, "Thank you so much for picking me. I really felt like the company was valuing my contribution. I felt like a star for a day because we're coming with lights and everyone looks awesome, well lit." And so we had to show pictures. They actually got to use those as professional photos if they wanted to. So that was a really great outcome to us that project, picking the storytellers. The way that in this case, the way that we prepped each person is we left it up to the site leader. So we said here we could do several things. The first is that we could have a conference call where everyone calls in and then we can record it and distribute it. Or we could talk to each person individually, because if there's some people that are particularly nervous and just need more of a one-on-one. Or if people are too busy, we can meet with them 15 minutes before the interview. So we gave each site leader that option, depending on what was best for their culture. Most of them chose the call-in. Like, let's just have a call where everyone calls in and can ask questions on the call. Any other questions? And that's great. Actually, I'm thrilled if you interrupt me, so go ahead.
How important do you think it is for the video equipment to be at a professional level? Like, do you think that there's something to be said for kind of that, like, for lack of a better term, like guerrilla videotaping?
Yeah.
Or?
I think there's a time and a place for both.
Okay.
And I think both work. I'm biased because we use a professional, and I like a kind of an intentional, organic but intentional. But of course, for what works and like what candidates prefer, I think both work. Any other questions so far? No? Okay, so what we actually created, the output, like what's the content? We interviewed 45 people, what do we do with it? We created 10 videos, 5 of which were about each different functional area. So we have a 2-minute video about culinary, 2-minute video about facilities management. And then we also pitched the rest of them as cultural things that we heard. So we always, the best content you can create is around purpose. So we create a video about purpose too, the purpose that people find in their work. We developed an interactive quiz, which I'll show you in a second. We delivered hundreds of photos. So these are headshots and then of people actually doing their job too, that Sodexo used on all their sites and all their promotional materials. We created a career pathing tool, which is you get to kind of see what the path might be for someone in culinary based on a real person who took that path. They developed a Q&A on their site. So just the point is lots of content, so much content, years of content. And they're even switching career sites, and they're porting all that content to their new site too. So they're continuing to use it into the future too. So thanks to Bernadette, my team member Bernadette, for coming up with, saying, hey, we really used all parts of the buffalo with this project. So there was no story that we didn't use. And even the quiz, the cutting room floor, we could make it into a quiz. So that's really great when you think about value and content lasting a long time. Every story you can use in different ways. And this is an example. So this is an example of a quiz. You can see it's been taken 5,000 times. Actually, it might be I think it's 6,000 times. And this is what we did with some of the cutting room floor. It didn't quite fit in any place. Okay, so we developed the quiz, what Sodexo difference maker are you? This is Sodexo's idea, this is the question. And then when you hit start, you're asked just 2 questions. Does not matter. Yep, anyone will do. And then depending on what you pick, you're one of 9 people. So this is Victoria. She's a real person. This is really her story. And hopefully, Victoria's story resonates with you because you answered the questions that map to her story. And then down below is a very fast video, 26 seconds. We don't need to play it because it's really quick, yeah. But that's an example of the stories that we couldn't fit anywhere else. Just put it in a quiz, and then it actually was very well taken. Okay, cool. And then they ran Facebook ads with some of this content. So this is some of the successes that they had. So for $250, they had 107,000 impressions, 101 clicks on the job with this content. And then women in leadership too, same thing, spending $75 only, getting all these impressions. So impressions is one form of measurement. What's really important to think about when you're putting your content out there and measuring its performance is that the average job seeker, there's a statistic that says a job seeker goes between 2 and 18 places before they click apply. So someone can watch a video and then they can go apply, but that doesn't mean that the video is the reason they applied. They could have watched a video 6 months ago and then applied. So it's hard to measure the direct correlation. The idea is awareness. So the impressions is really great. How many people saw, it was how many people got exposure to the content. This is also, Sodexo thinks this is a success because they put this on their, this is our purpose video, and they put this on their Facebook page. And they really liked that 25 people commented, 33 people shared, and here's other people sharing their stories like, oh, I was working for Sodexo, it was a great experience. These are people on their Facebook page. Okay, so that was Sodexo. Any questions about that project at all? Yes?
You mentioned that it turns into years of content.
Mm-hmm.
Do you manage that, or is that something that you just pass over to them and they manage?
They manage it. And I know that it's not everybody's life. They do have a team of 3, for a very large. But yes, we give them the content, and then they manage the distribution of it and the measurement of it. Yes?
How did you come up with the idea for a quiz?
That's a great question. So the actual story is that at work, we said, okay, we have all this great content that doesn't fit in any of the things that we were already going to do for Sodexo. And we wanted to do something interactive and different in addition to videos, and they were open to that idea. So actually one of our interns came up with the idea, let's develop a quiz that's like BuzzFeed, kind of like what kind of pizza do you eat? That type, or what kind of food are you? So our intern came up with the idea of the quiz, and then we found a quiz that's open source, so it's basically free. It's this thing called Quizzer. And then pitched that to Sodexo, like here's what it might look like, and then they said, oh, it's a good idea, let's do it. So that's how we came up with the idea, is basically just brainstorming amongst our team. Here's these great stories. We want to put it in something that's interactive and fun, and that's how we came up with it. Yep.
How did Sodexo determine the ROI?
Oh, that's a really good question. I wish they were here to tell you that. I know that they view it positively. And I know that they measured some of the campaign parts. And I know that they are, so I'm not, let me think more deeply about that, maybe post it or ask Sodexo directly how they measured ROI, and then I can get that back to the group, because I know that they did. And we're continuing to work with them today, so we have a great relationship. I'm happy to ask. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so it seems like we were pretty evenly split, so I'm just going to go to CVS, yes, so great choice. So for them, this was really interesting because they take a team approach. So the business will come to employer branding and say, we're having a challenge getting candidates for this particular role, or we are completely growing we're starting a contact center, a call center. And we need to scale up fast. So the business is coming to employer branding saying this is our challenge, and they're offering developing content as an option. So we've been able to, in the past year, we've been able to create content for the call center that needs to ramp up quickly, and that mostly means recruiting people that have no call center experience. Show purpose for their merchandising group, because these are their buyers, and they had lots of really great stories about why they do some of the work that they do. And then there was a group out of Chicago that was having a hard time recruiting ex-consultants, so very specific target. The team itself is doing some analytical work for CVS, and they were all ex-consultants, so they wanted to target people who might be working at McKinsey or Bain and wanting to go to a corporate, exciting corporate opportunity. So as I mentioned, we're working with the business and the brand leader on this. So we would have a kickoff call with the person, the hiring manager, that's responsible for the hiring, and then the employer brand leader. We would talk challenges with the story team. So what's the problem? Oh, we need to scale up hiring, for example. They selected the people. They gave us feedback on the content. And then they launched the content for 4 to 6 weeks. So from kickoff to launch, it took 4 to 6 weeks to create 3 to 5 story or videos. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. Yeah, go ahead.
What's your storytelling methodology? How do you construct this story?
Great question. It is so. I would say that I always say it's like recruiter, love letter to recruiting, because I helped form the process, and I love recruiting, and I really enjoyed the field. So I'd say the process is to get specifics about what it's like to work somewhere, and to be The prep is really helpful because it's very tough for people to talk in examples. So letting people know that, hey, we see a lot of things and we know what's generic. So when we hear things like, I love working here because it's like family, that is really awesome to feel, but that doesn't tell candidates anything. So really our methodology, our storytelling methodology is to be as specific as possible and to get the actual story, and then tie it back to things like purpose or values. A lot of times we know what the organization's values are ahead of time, so we kind of know where we're going, but we also let the content drive the methodology, meaning the stories drive the entire process. Does that answer your question?
Do you, yeah, sort of, do you create like tension and, you know, give like a resolution in that kind of story arc, or do you just kind of ask people questions, they talk, and then you cut it together in a way that works?
It's both. So a lot of times we'll have to actually walk through the construct of the story, like what happened when you got here, what was the problem, what did you specifically do, what is the outcome. So sometimes we have to walk people through that construction to get that, the mechanics of a story. But oftentimes it's also very organic. Tell me about your best day at work, and that just naturally happens. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to play one of the videos. This is for the merchandising team about the purpose in their work.
There are always flashes of, yes, this is why I'm here, and yes, this was the right move. One that really solidified it for me was actually the day we exited tobacco. My father's a smoker. It has been a battle in our family for as long as I can remember. I remember my mom calling me that day, and she was so proud, and she couldn't believe that I worked for a company that did that. She was almost in tears, which then in turn I was almost in tears, and I thought, you know what? That was a really gutsy move, and I was really proud to come into work that day. And I think out of everything, that was the day where I sat back and I thought, I am absolutely in the right place.
It's an example of a story illustrating purpose. Oh, no problem. And if she leaves, if Mary Alice leaves, it doesn't really matter, because it's about a moment in time. So that content lasts a while. Okay, so that was CVS. So we're on to Dell. Here we are. So in Dell's case, this was a different approach where we were going category by category. So we started with interns. Hey, let's talk about the intern experience and develop all of that content. And then after that, the content performed very well. So then we went on to veterans. What's it like to be a veteran? What does Dell do for veterans? And then women in technology. And then we're doing their rotational program next year. So it's something where if you have a hole, a content hole, you can have a very narrow focus if you'd like women in technology. So Dell's contribution, it was a little interesting because they have their employer brand leader and then also 3 team members who are also on the brand team. It was more than usual because at the time we started working with them on the intern project, they had just bought EMC. So we were doing work for Dell, but they also wanted to include EMC members to welcome them into the Dell family. They didn't just want it to be Dell intern experiences. Let's honor the experiences that EMC interns had too. What's interesting about this process is, as I mentioned, we always have a plan, but it's still fairly organic. We let our clients pick the people that we're talking to, and sometimes there's some, if you're kind of a type A organized person, it's like, oh, they're going to say anything? They could say anything. So they wanted to pick interns and then interview them ahead of time, and then have us come in. So we did that, and then once they saw the content and just how we work, they said, oh, okay, you guys got it. So you guys can take veterans. It works. The process works. The organic can work too. As I mentioned, they selected storytellers, and they were responsible for feedback sessions, seeing the content as it's being developed. And of course, this is what we did. Same thing every time. Getting good stories, creating content from those stories. And for them, we created 4 to 5 videos per category. We wrote 4 to 5 blog posts. What I think is really interesting about Dell is their blog also faces customers, also addresses customers and employees. It's a general blog. It's not a careers blog, while there is career site content there, career content there. So what's really great is if you're a candidate not thinking about working for Dell at all, but you are searching about your Dell product that you like, you're being hit with employer branding and recruitment marketing content. Like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, so that's what it's like to work for Dell. So I think that's really brilliant because they do a good job, integrating all content about their company. We also, same thing like Sodexo, we took photos and we handed those over to Dell. So if for some reason, probably 70% of the work we do is video, but if that is too high a cost, and there are ways to do it affordably, photos still also work really well. Dell's a technology company, but the photos that we took and the slideshow we put together, which I'll show, performed very, very well. They had a lot of views and a lot of shares. And then we'll just click through a few. So these are just pictures and then quotes from the interview and some statistics. So those pictures we took, something that she said during the interview process, and this was viewed over 6,000 times in a short period of time. And here's our veteran content too. As I mentioned, we did the exact same thing for veterans, which were some really powerful, a lot of really powerful content from that too. Not only, there's lots of angles. The first is, how does Sodexo hire veterans, but also what does Dell do for their families? So we actually were able to create a ton of content around the veteran experience. So this is the Dell success just with interns. So 1.4 million social impressions with our content. You can see this is one of our photos, and then a quote from the interview, and over 1,000 people liked it. 68,000 views of the blogs that we wrote, and that content, this is just a snapshot in time. This is actually, let's see, the intern content launched in the fall of 2016, and this is June of 2017 is what these results are. And that's out there living and continuing to breathe and get views. Okay, so as I mentioned, now you can kind of, if we have content that addresses a specific recruiting challenge, I'm going to try to show it real time, or I can just go through some scenarios I've prepared. What do you guys think? We can stick with the choose your own adventure. If you have an idea, I'm happy to do it on the fly, or I can just go through. No opinion? Oh, okay, go ahead.
So I really appreciate this perspective. I think it's very smart and very forward thinking. We are a lot smaller than those companies.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And one, budget of course comes into play. Even putting names with faces, it scares people that basically is showing who our superstars are to the world, and buy-in. So I think the return on investment is a really good question, kind of like how do you sell this in a smaller scale to a company that's maybe not as forward-thinking as like Dell or Sodexo?
Yeah, I think that's really hard too. One would be starting very small on a super budget. So it costs very little to interview some of your employees, and you can even use first name. You don't have to use their whole name or whatever. You can make it anonymous, and even just text-based stories are, and then going out and seeing how they perform. The thing that's tough about that is you need to be, over time, developing your channel. So how it performs really depends on, the regularity that you're posting and the audience that you're building over time. So if you have the best video in the world and you put it out, we developed some really great content that I loved, but it went on a YouTube channel with 200 followers. So I'd say that how I would approach that when you don't have a budget, and if people are wary, I would interview a bunch of people in my organization, text-based stories. I would start sharing it on social on the regular. And really, the best practice is to do it for 6 months on a regular basis, and then see what happens. And then you'll be able to say, hey, listen, and hopefully, the tracking can be tricky, but after a period of time, where are your hires coming from? And it may even take one anecdote to prove that the whole project is worth it. So a really good example, so we worked with a small government consulting company, and we developed 3 videos for them. They put it on their Facebook page. They were wondering, what's going to happen? They did get a lot of views, so sure. But in an interview with a finalist candidate, the CEO asked, it was a candidate that he was surprised to see come through, a senior person, that he was surprised to make it to the end because they weren't from government contracting. They were from a Fortune 100 company, a very impressive background. And he said, oh, why did you apply? And the one candidate said, I was looking for a company that had a great culture. I was not considering government contracting. I happened across your video in my Facebook feed because they did some Facebook ads, and I applied. So that's the reason he applied. So someone hearing that, like and they hired that person. So sometimes it just takes the one key hire that came from your content. But again, it's helpful to do it for at least 6 months and see what happens. And then hopefully you can make the case for it. Yes, I don't know where to go first. I'll go here.
We recently did videos for a new referral program that we kicked out. We took a day, sat down 8 people, and I was amazed how terrified
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
to be in front of
Yeah.
the camera. I knew some people who present at company functions, who were outgoing and bright, but as soon as that camera
Yeah.
turns on, it was like, so we ended up taking, it turned out great, by the way, American system. But we took short snippets
Yeah.
of them talking, and when you put it all together, it worked. But the woman you had really a long speech that she put out. Obviously, some of that's being prepared or preparing the candidate. Do you have any other tips for
I do. I have so many.
honing those?
Yes.
So many.
Yeah, and I'd say it's like similar to interview prep when your star candidate's going to the final interview is kind of how I felt. Like it's so much positive reinforcement. And that same project I spoke about, the government contractor, we had 2 interviewers, and at the end of the day I was surprised to hear the interviewer feedback was that the people who had the interviewer that gave them thumbs up continuously felt like they did awesome, and the people who didn't felt like they did terrible and like I was nervous, and so I'd say that so much, and understanding that when people tell stories, the first one's always going to be really long, and you let them get it out and let them talk, and then you say, that was so good. Let's do it again and focus on these 3 things. And then also, and so that would be one thing, the positive reinforcement, like I love that story, that's going to be great, and let's tell it this way because these are things that are important. Also, if you do a professional, if people are nervous about how they look, if you do a professional shoot, showing them a picture of what they look like really helps because everyone looks awesome with lighting. And it's like, oh, I look great, I've got this, So I'd say that's one thing one thing that can help a lot. I think telling people too, hey, we're just gonna take 30 seconds of a half-hour interview. We're going to take the very best of what you say. You can do things over, but then of course giving them that constructive feedback of like, oh, here's what's good. I think that helps too. Like, hey, we're not going to take you telling the story for 5 minutes. And Mary Alice, I wasn't on that shoot, so I can't speak to it, but we get a lot of B-roll so that we can splice things up so it's more succinct. Because people, it's great when you get someone that's really succinct, but it's also great when you get someone excited and they want to tell you all the details, and then you can pick the details that are important after the fact. So I say getting B-roll so you can edit that down is important. Yep.
Have you incorporated like the new video on LinkedIn, like where people can just kind of upload short snippets into an integrated employee branding program, or what do you think about that?
I think it's great. We haven't done it yet, and our videos haven't been used with clients yet, but I think it's great. I think let's make video commonplace. There's a statistic that says our Facebook feeds are going to be 90% video in 3 years or something like that. To make any way that makes video more commonplace, I think is a great idea. So I support it. Yep.
I have a specific question about like when you target those groups for Dell, women in tech.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? What's a few tips for getting content for a specific group? Like, we are a tech company, not well known in tech.
Yeah.
We want to get good engineers. How do you create content catering to that population?
That's interviewing your superstars and telling them, other people that are going to see themselves in that person, why it's a great place. So I'd say that's key to the, that's the special sauce really, is the people you want more of, talking to the people that you want to join your organization, and those people are hearing stories. The science of hearing a story in your brain is it's the only way you can plant a memory in someone else's mind. So it's like, it makes it feels like it happened or is happening to them. So an emotional story, you hear that, your brain lights up. When you hear an emotional story, your brain lights up the same place that the storyteller brain does. So I'd say that's the key, is people you want more of, to talk about the experience. So the people who are viewing it are putting themselves there. Like, oh, this person looks like me, their background's like me, this looks like a great place, that's important to me too. And it's also really important for that because you want people to opt out as well. The idea is to get more the people that you want more of, and it's better for everyone when you see content that polarizing is the wrong word, but should be really unique to what your organization is really like. If that makes sense.
On that note, what if the people don't already exist? So for example, we have a really small engineering team, none of which are women.
Yeah.
So obviously a big priority is hiring more women engineers, but we can't tell the story of what it's like to be a woman engineer at our company. So what's the story when you want to attract what you don't already have?
That is such a good question, and I don't have the answer. I wish I did. Bernadette, do you have any ideas? Not to put you on the spot, but I know I don't. We haven't come across that like before.
I'll have to think about it.
Okay. The same thing, like with the ROI question. We'll figure it out and then post it to the group if our team has a collective thought or if any of our clients do. That's a great question. Oh, go ahead.
How do you determine which social media channel to use for the content?
So we don't. We hand over the content to the clients, and they do. We make some suggestions based on what's performed for clients in the past. But even the people who know their analytics really well still experiment with different things. So I'd say if you don't know, to experiment in lots of different ways to figure out what works is the best. Even the people who know are still experimenting with different things. Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that career pathing tool?
Sure. So Sodexo wanted to show real people's careers to show that like this is the path that someone typically does take. So if you go on their site, it's basically taking stories of someone's career, and then we're showing, we have the story, and then we're showing pictures of the person throughout the whole.
You ever had to deal with, or how do you handle, because I'm sure this probably doesn't happen, where an organization might be a really hard place to work. It's intense, not easy work, but when we try to do this kind of messaging, we try to make it all roses, and then you've got that sort of big gap between brand vision, brand reality. How do you address that? What kind of stories can you use to make that kind of attraction?
Yeah, so be as realistic as how tough it is as possible, because that's going to attract the right person for your culture. I know that their culture has changed, but Amazon was, known as having a very tough culture. Is that a hey, see ya?
I think it's
Okay. But when you would tell people stories of what it's like to work at Amazon, the right people are like, oh, I love it, metrics, and if you don't perform, you're out. I love that, So I'd say make it as realistic as possible, because then you don't want to have there's lots of reasons why. First of all, you're not being a good human if you're painting a rosier picture for marketing, fooling job seekers into thinking one thing, and then they get there and it's not the reality. But besides that, just from a business perspective, I'm sure everyone knows this, but the attrition, someone gets in, they're like, oh, I'm so out of here. This is not what I thought. It's 6 months, I'm kind of out of here. So I'd say being as realistic as possible, and get the people who are most successful, and hearing real stories about what has made them successful usually ferrets out those stories. One person that worked at Amazon said about how, and he was a senior person, he was delivering packages on Christmas Day, and he's an executive. So it's like, that's a great story to tell other people. Oh, you're going to do it all. It's going to be you're going to be delivering packages. Go ahead.
That's a little bit like I forget which brand of service, but they have one like, we do more before 8 a.m. Most of the rest of the people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, like that's not me.
But then they go on and do all these positive things about, if you, it's one of those recruiting ads that they have. But they have, first they start with the negative. Or what could be perceived as a negative.
Yeah.
But then they go on about, what are all the positives about it.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe some kind of spin like that.
Yeah, as long as you're being real about we do more before 8 a.m. because you're getting up at 3 a.m. Whatever, it's like, it's really happening, yeah. Yeah. Yes? Oh, my friend.
Videos that kind of connect to the skills of the job. So
Yes. So I'd say we worked with the company One Technologies, and their content hasn't launched yet, or I would share it. Very technical, the projects that their developers are working on, and they were very, very clear about what's exciting in the projects and using the technical names specifically. And even on the other side, so we have, actually can show you guys. We did work with a company called Menzies Aviation, recruiting a lot of people who are working in airports, fueling operators, things like that. So a realistic job, it's basically a realistic job preview of people actually doing their job and talking about how hard it is. But yes, to answer your question, yes. And the more specific, the better to recruit a specific, when you're thinking about like job descriptions. Oh, no question? Okay. Okay, yep.
Do you have any advice about kind of like driving away a certain type of candidate?
Yeah.
Like for example, in sales, we always get applicants that have tons of experience and we don't want anyone like that. We want people that have like no experience.
Yeah, I think that is, so yeah, I hear you. I'd say that one way, like the CVS call center was a good example because they were recruiting, they actually were, I guess it's a different story because in their case, the pool didn't have the people that had customer service experience. Okay.
I guess one example I would give for that would be we're working with a government contractor right now, defense contractor, and one of their engineers, her major in college was literature and writing. So I think finding the people in your organization that have that background that has nothing to do with sales and then talking them through like what convinced them to go into sales and what they liked about it. So she talked about all of her writing and that interest in literature, and then she took one little coding class and she loved it, and then all of a sudden she went into it. So I think finding those people and demonstrating that would appeal to the people that don't have the sales background.
But I don't have any advice on driving them away. Okay, so here's a hiring manager video. Here's values. We can play a little bit of this. So this is what happens when you want to communicate the values of your company. You can do one video or piece of content per value, or you can create one piece of content about your values. So this is a good, interesting story.
2012, I was pretty much alone in Austin. My family all lived back in North Carolina. And I had to have some major surgery. And one of the people that I worked with was a really good friend. They gave him the day off so that he could come stay with me in the hospital. But it was only going to be after the surgery the next day that he could be there. So I was a little panicked about being alone in the hospital. And when I woke up from my surgery, my manager was sitting in my hospital room. And then when I woke up again later, somebody else from my team was there. Sorry. It was probably the only time that I just wasn't afraid, when you're very vulnerable. And I don't know, it was just perfect.
For love, the symbol that represents love is a heart. I don't think I need to explain that. It makes a lot of sense to most people. And quite frankly, love is the easiest one to explain too. It's love our clients, love our company, love our coworkers.
And I think what a defining moment for me when I really, fell in love with our clients was after we went through all of the work to do the initial launch of the Kasasa brand. And I worked really closely with that initial set of 10 pioneer clients, and I got to know them really well. And then we had this big event when we decided this is going to be our core strategy. We called it Kasasa Nation. There was, 500 people there. And we had this group of this group of pioneer clients get up, and they gave their stories and their testimonials. And I remember I was standing in the back of the room, this huge room with all these people, and all of a sudden I'm crying back there listening to these clients tell their stories about how this has changed their credit union, how it's changed the culture of their bank, how it's saved their bank. Really major stories. And actually some of them made personal shout outs to me from the stage, and I just was so touched. And I realized these are my friends now. We've really bonded by building a brand together. That's something that most people don't do in a lifetime.
Whether it be the death of grandparents or my daughter in the hospital. And every single time, the company rallied around me. From when I came back from a funeral, there'd be a pot of flowers there, or a donation made to a charity, or a nice huge basket full of candy and movies and books and things for my daughter in the hospital.
If you take a moment to think about the person that you love the most, and imagine them struggling or having a hard time, what emotion does that elicit? Probably what you want to do is you want to reach out and help them. You want to talk to them. You want to encourage them and help them. And you care about them, right? And that's really what love is all about.
But yeah, so it's surprising too. You would expect maybe like an accounting like they're actually compliance accounting software, and they have a very touchy-feely culture. So you might not expect that if they didn't have content that you were viewing to tell you that. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Who's paying for this? Whose budget is this?
Great question. Really good question. Lots of different places. So CVS, the business is funding it. The people who are having the problem are funding it. And maybe they're splitting it, but I think for the most part that's how it's working. For Sodexo, they have an employer branding team, they have a budget, but they are also very strategic about their spending. So it's something that they talked about doing for 3 years and then budgeted like 3 years ahead. Now, I'm not saying that that's because it was so expensive, it's just that's how their budget cycles work and that's how they have to validate internally. Dell, because of the Dell EMC merger, they had money they had money around that event, their team. Visionist, which is the small government contractor in Maryland, it didn't come from a budget, but the CEO purchased it. Another thought is, especially if anyone works at a smaller company that has a founder CEO, appealing to a sense of, hey, you're growing, the culture is going to be out of your hands, the culture you crafted. Let's get those stories from early days to make sure that everyone's onboarded or everyone coming in the organization. That's been very helpful for us in a selling capacity when you're talking to a founder CEO, appealing to that sense of scaling and what they've built. Oh, wrapping it up. Okay. Any other questions at all? Was this helpful? Was this good? Was this bad? Okay. All right, and hopefully you can go do it. Thank you.